100 Forgotten Things from 1970s America. A warm memory reel from the decade when lava lamps glowed. Kids ruled the sidewalks and the world still paused for supper. In 1970, the average American home cost just under $24,000. And you got a lot for it too. Avocado green appliances, shag carpet thick enough to lose your keys in, and a front lawn where dads mowed shirtless on Saturdays. Gas was about 36 cents a gallon. That meant $5 could fill your tank and still get you a Coke in a glass bottle and a Slim Jim for the road. And no one checked their mileage. They just drove. Station wagons were the family chariot, wood-paneled back-facing third-row seats, no seatbelts, and your brother's elbow in your ribs the whole ride. The windows down, wind in your face, AM radio crackling out the Eagles or Afternoon Delight. You didn't need a GPS. You had a glove compartment full of gas station maps, half of them with circles around towns you never actually visited. And if you got lost, you asked a stranger, and they told you probably with a pencil and a napkin. Your phone was rotary harvest gold or avocado green mounted to the kitchen wall with a cord that reached just far enough to let you duck around the corner for privacy. If someone else in the house picked up another phone, well, so much for secrets. The microwave was a space-age miracle. Giant buzzing, dangerous looking. Your mom swore it could fry your brain, but you watched your leftovers spin with awe, and popcorn never felt so futuristic. Supper time was sacred. No cell phones, no notifications, just a dinner bell or a mom's voice yelling out the back door. Meatloaf, instant mashed potatoes, and Jell-O with marshmallows, not gourmet, but full of love. Kids played until the streetlights came on. Sidewalks became racetracks for banana seat bikes with cards clipped to the spokes. You skinned your knee, ran home crying, and got a kiss, a Band-Aid, and a lecture about being tough. There were no helmets, no elbow pads, no cell phones to call for help. Just you, your bike, and the whole neighborhood. And somehow, everyone survived. TV had just 3 channels. 4, if you counted PBS. And you had to get up to change them. No remote, no streaming. Just scheduled programming and anticipation. You circled shows in the TV guide, and Friday night meant the Brady Bunch. Saturday mornings were holy. Cartoons from 7 to noon, Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, and Schoolhouse Rock in between. You poured a mixing bowl-sized helping of Cap'n Crunch, planted yourself on the shag rug, and disappeared into animation. You didn't binge watch. You waited. And if you missed an episode, tough luck. You talked about it on Monday at school like it was a shared national event. The record player was sacred furniture, wood-paneled with a lift-top lid and big silver knobs. You placed the needle, gently sat cross-legged on the carpet, and let Fleetwood Mac, the Bee Gees, or Simon and Garfunkel carry you somewhere else. 8 tracks clicked mid-song, and everyone pretended it was normal. Cassettes came next, and rewinding with a pencil became an essential life skill. Your older brother had a poster of Farrah Fawcett or Bruce Lee, and maybe blacklight velvet art of a tiger or a unicorn. The room smelled like burnt incense and something else you weren't supposed to talk about. Your dad had a lazy boy plaid or corduroy with a lever that stuck. He'd lean back, beer balanced on his belly, watching the news while muttering about gas prices or the Soviets. There was a CB radio in the car. Breaker 19, and that's a big 10-4 became part of the family lexicon. Everyone had a handle. Yours might have been Lil Biscuit, popcorn ceiling, wood paneling, orange and brown everything. The 1970s had a color palette you could taste. Burnt sienna mustard, yellow avocado green. Even your kitchen clock looked like a sunflower. You drank Tang because astronauts did. Ate SpaghettiOs because they were fun. And you knew how to open a can with a manual opener, not a button. School had chalkboards, film projectors, and teachers who smoked in the lounge. You got Ditto's warm purple-inked copies that smelled like chemicals and joy. No digital slides, no laptops. Just pencils, notebooks, and elbow grease. You memorized multiplication tables with flashcards, not apps. If you forgot your homework, there was no excuse. And if you talked back well, the paddle was still in use in some places. Your mom had a recipe box with cards written in perfect cursive. Chicken tetrazzini, tuna, noodle casserole, and ambrosia salad. No QR codes, no influencers. Just family recipes passed down, with a smudge of love and Crisco. You remember the Sears catalog. Not a website, a book thick enough to stop a door. It came around Christmas, and you circled toys with a red pen and hoped Santa had a good memory. You remember the smell of Play-Doh, salty soft, and a little like kindergarten dreams. It came in little yellow tubs with bright-colored lids, and you made spaghetti dinosaurs, or whatever your imagination demanded. No screens, just fingers and wonder. Your lunchbox was metal. Scooby-Doo Evel Knievel, or the Fonz, smiled from the side. Inside, a bologna sandwich on white bread, a Twinkie or a ding-dong, and a thermos full of lukewarm milk. No one talked about sugar content. You were just happy. Recess meant freedom. Kickball, dodgeball, and monkey bars with no safety mats below. If you fell, you cried. Maybe, but mostly you got up. Your hands smelled like rust from the chains, and your heart beat like a drum of summer. In the back seat, you played Slug Bug or I Spy. And if someone said, "Are we there yet?" more than twice, Dad would say something like, "Don't make me turn this car around." He never did, but you believed him. The family camera was a Kodak, flash cubes that popped and smelled faintly of heat. You only had 24 shots, so each picture mattered. You didn't check it. You didn't delete it. You waited a week and picked it up from the drugstore with fingers crossed. Your bedroom had a record player posters and maybe glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. You made mixtapes by holding your cassette recorder up to the radio, praying no one talked during your favorite song. You remember your first pair of bell-bottoms, maybe corduroy, maybe denim, maybe paisley. And when you walked, they swished like they had attitude, especially if you paired them with a mood ring or a puka shell necklace. If your parents had company, you stayed in your room unless cold. You peeked from the hallway, hoping for a cookie or a wink from the fun aunt. The house filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of cheese balls and French onion dip. TV commercials were jingles you couldn't forget. I'd like to buy the world a Coke. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. They weren't just ads, they were anthems. And sometimes the commercial was better than the show. You knew the exact sound of a needle hitting vinyl, that soft thump, hiss, crackle before the music began. It was like opening a door to another world. And you never skipped songs. You listened all the way through. There were Polaroid photos on the fridge, faded, slightly blurry, with someone blinking or mid-laugh. But they mattered because you were there. Proof that a moment happened and now it lived in soft, off-color corners. Your school had film strips. The teacher would dim the lights, thread the reel, and suddenly the room was full of flickering light and the voice of some calm narrator explaining the food chain or photosynthesis. If you were lucky, it came with a beep to turn the frame. You had a bike, and that bike was freedom. Maybe it had a banana seat. Maybe it was a Schwinn Stingray. Maybe it was covered in stickers. It didn't matter. It was your ticket to the corner store, the creek, and independence. The toy aisle was a wonderland. Stretch Armstrong Rock, M. Sock'em robots, Weebles that wobbled but didn't fall down. No batteries, no problem. You used gravity springs and imagination. Snoopy was everywhere. On your pajamas, your lunchbox, your bedspread. You waited for a Charlie Brown Christmas or The Great Pumpkin to air once a year. No reruns, no streaming. It made it special. School photos meant combed hair, a nervous smile, and that terrible blue-gray background. Your mom ordered the wallet-sized ones to pass out to relatives, whether you liked the photo or not. And everyone said, "Look how much you've grown." There was always one kid who brought a Rubik's Cube to school and somehow solved it. The rest of you peeled off the stickers and called it done. You watched MASH, even if you didn't understand all the jokes. You laughed when the laugh track told you to, and you cried when the music at the end got soft and sad. It was more than a show. It was a feeling. At sleepovers, you told ghost stories, made prank calls from landlines, and dared someone to say Bloody Mary in the bathroom mirror. The bravest always went first. The smartest never did. Arcades were temples of neon light. You stacked quarters on the screen to call next. Pac-Man Space Invaders Asteroids. Your fingers moved on instinct. And if you made the high score, you signed it with 3 sacred letters, your initials. Halloween costumes were made, not bought. Cardboard robot heads, bed sheets for ghosts, aluminum foil helmets. You didn't need realism, just effort. And a big pillowcase for candy. Thanksgiving wasn't catered. It was cooked. All day. Turkey stuffing green bean casserole with crunchy onions on top. And every table had a dish no one really liked, but everyone took a spoonful of out of guilt or tradition. The mall was the place to be. Orange Julius Spencer's Gifts, and that one record store with the beaded curtain in the back. You didn't shop online. You walked, you talked, you hung out. And somehow, with no internet, no smartphones, and no hashtags, we remembered each other. You remember Sunday mornings, not as quiet, but warm. The smell of pancakes on the griddle. The radio playing John Denver or Carole King, Dad reading the paper, Mom humming while flipping the bacon, and the sun pouring through gingham curtains like honey. The living room had a console TV, not just a screen, but a piece of furniture. Wood-paneled, heavy as sin, with a big silver dial and rabbit ears wrapped in tinfoil. When the picture flickered, someone smacked the side. And like magic, it worked again. You didn't binge watch. You waited all week for Happy Days or Laverne and Shirley. And when it came on, the whole family watched together. No distractions, no scrolling, just popcorn soda and laughter. Your teacher rolled in the overhead projector, and everyone gasped. Transparencies and dry erase markers felt like cutting-edge tech. And when the projector fan hummed, so did the classroom, quiet, focused, curious. You remember the smell of mimeograph ink, sharp, and sweet, like blue ghosts on white paper. Tests printed warm. You fanned them with your hand, and somehow that made it easier to pass. You had chores, raking leaves, sweeping the porch, taking out the trash, not for allowance, but because you live here too. There was no app to remind you, just a parent's voice, and you listened. Bicentennial, everything. It was 1976, and suddenly, America went red, white, and blue. Plates, t-shirts, lunchboxes, fireworks, even soda cans got patriotic. Everyone felt like history was alive, and it was strangely comforting. Disco hit the airwaves and changed everything. Saturday night wasn't for staying in. It was for platform shoes, polyester shirts, and dancing under mirrored lights. Even if you couldn't dance, you moved, and you felt cool. Your mom had Tupperware parties, bright orange, pea green, and mustard yellow containers stacked on the kitchen table, lids that burped when sealed. The party wasn't really about plastic. It was about laughter stories and someone bringing Jell-O salad. The couch had plastic covers, and no one knew why. Hot in the summer, squeaky in the winter, but always spotless. You weren't allowed to eat on it, but somehow, someone always did. If your family got a new appliance, it came with a manual the size of a novella. Your dad read every word, then never touched it again. But the box it came in. You played with that for a week. Spaceship Fort race car. Limitless. Drive-in theaters were still around, fading, but not forgotten. The crackling speaker on your window fog on the glass, and a trunk full of blankets and kids who probably weren't supposed to be there. Double features, mosquito bites, and kissing under stars. The local fair came once a year and took over your world. Cotton candy, tilt-a-whirl goldfish in bags, and that impossible ring toss. Game you almost won. You left sticky, sunburnt, and entirely alive. You rode the school bus without supervision. No cameras, no seatbelts, just a driver who knew all your names and a back row where legends were made. If you had a window seat, you were royalty. You remember the scent of new textbooks, cardboard glue, and possibility. You got to write your name inside the cover and maybe find one from your cousin 2 years older. Science class had frogs in jars, anatomy posters on the wall, and experiments that sometimes involved vinegar baking soda and a small explosion. Safety goggles optional. Cigarette smoke was everywhere, diners' offices, bowling alleys. Your teacher smoked in the parking lot. Your aunt smoked in the kitchen. Even your doctor sometimes smelled like Lucky Strikes. And no one seemed alarmed. There was a payphone on every corner. A real clunky booth with a folding door and that smell of coins and cold metal. A dime could call home. A quarter could get you in trouble. Magazines weren't just paper, they were events. Lifetime, National Geographic. You flipped every page, cut out pictures, and read long stories without swiping. Some covers you still remember. Your lunch sometimes came in a brown paper bag squished in your backpack. And if your mom wrote a note inside, even just, "I love you," you folded it and kept it longer than the sandwich. Snow days were magic. No texts, no alerts. Just a voice on the radio listing school closures in alphabetical order. And when you heard your town, the whole house erupted like Christmas morning. Summers meant Kool-Aid mustaches, slip and slides on the lawn, and catching fireflies in a jar. No AC. No problem. You stayed out until your skin smelled like grass and your fingers were sticky with popsicle. You remember your first crush, maybe someone from class, maybe a celebrity, maybe both. You doodled their name on your notebook. You didn't tell anyone, but somehow they were in every dream that summer. You remember the ice cream truck, that distant jingle echoing through a summer afternoon. It didn't matter what you were doing. The whole neighborhood paused. Barefoot pockets jingling with change, you ran like it was the Olympics. At the grocery store, everything was bagged in paper. No one asked paper or plastic. You helped your mom carry the brown bags to the station wagon, and if one ripped well, you scooped it up and kept going. Catalog shopping was an event. Sears, JCPenney, Montgomery Ward, thick books filled with dreams. You circled bikes, BB guns, Barbie dolls, record players, and Christmas. It began the day that catalog hit the mailbox. TV stations signed off at night. After the late news, the national anthem played, and then static. No 2 a.m. infomercials. No endless scroll. That fuzzy gray snow was your cue to go to bed or risk Dad yelling from the hallway. Your dad had a briefcase and a hat. He didn't talk much about work, but he was home at 5:30 sharp. Dinner was at 6, and when he walked in, you straightened up because Dad's home meant something. You didn't Google symptoms. You went to the doctor, who probably remembered your birthday and your mom's maiden name. And if you got sick, the remedy was 7-Up, Vicks on your chest, and staying under a quilt until you sweated out. Road trips didn't have iPads or chargers. They had Mad Lib's travel bingo and 99 bottles of beer sung out of tune. The scenery changed slowly, and someone always asked, "How much longer?" just as you passed the state line. Hotel keys were actual keys, attached to big plastic fobs with the room number etched in gold. You didn't swipe. You turned. And if you lost it, the front desk clerk knew you by name. Your babysitter was the teenager down the street. No apps. No background checks. Just a knock on the door, and "Hi, Mrs. Reynolds sent me." She let you stay up late and watch the Love Boat, and you never told your mom. Your bike chain slipped, your shoe sole flapped, your toy broke, and you tried to fix it with tape or glue or sheer will. Because replacing things wasn't easy, and you learned to make do. The milk still came in glass bottles in some towns. If not, it came in cardboard cartons with fold and pour spouts that never quite worked. You sniffed before sipping just in case. Your teacher had a paddle. It hung behind her desk like a warning. Maybe she never used it, but she didn't have to. One look, that was enough. And you said yes, ma'am, without being told twice. Report cards came in manila envelopes, handwritten, signed by the teacher, and brought home like sacred documents. And if yours had a C in math, you prayed your parents focused on the A in English. If your mom had a headache, it wasn't Advil. It was a cold cloth quiet and a closed door. And you tiptoed. Not because she asked, but because you understood. Birthday parties were backyard affairs. Pin the tail on the donkey, paper hats, a cake your mom made in a bundt pan, and a Polaroid photo with everyone squinting into the sun. No themes, no bouncy castles, just joy. You remember the first time you held a Walkman. The headphones were orange foam, and the music felt private, like it belonged to you and no one else. That was power. That was freedom. Magnet poetry hadn't been invented, but your fridge still told stories. School pictures, postcards, souvenir magnets from Niagara Falls or Mount Rushmore. It was a museum of memory. Trapper keepers were currency. The Velcro flap, the bright neon designs, it wasn't just a folder. It was a statement. If yours had a unicorn or race cars, people noticed. The flag was everywhere. On patches, bumper stickers, even lunchboxes. After the turmoil of the 60s, the 70s were trying to believe again in America, in family, in something steady. You remember Watergate, not just the scandal, but the way your parents talked about it in whispers. The television stayed on longer. Walter Cronkite's voice got heavier. And even as a kid, you knew something big was changing. The Vietnam War wasn't in the past, it was still happening. Older kids in your neighborhood went away and didn't come back the same. And even though no one talked about it at dinner, it lingered like smoke in the drapes. You remember your first time seeing a microwave or a calculator and thinking, how can something this small do that? It was magic. Expensive magic. But magic nonetheless. You didn't worry about screen time because there weren't that many screens. Instead, you worried about bedtime missing chips or who got to sit in the front seat next time. You remember the gas lines, not traffic lines. Long, quiet, anxious. Odd days, even days, depending on your license plate. People waited with coffee in hand and radios low, hoping the station wouldn't run out before it was their turn. The price signs changed by hand. Giant plastic numbers hoisted up with long poles, one digit at a time. You watched it go from 43 cents to 55, then 60. Adults sighed. Kids didn't understand, not yet. You remember when a phone call across the country cost real money. Your parents said, make it quick before you even dialed. And if someone shouted, it's long distance, everyone came running because that mattered. Your grandmother had a rotary phone, a candy dish full of butterscotch, and a Bible on the table. She watched the Lawrence Welk show, folded laundry with perfect corners, and said, God willing, before every plan. Your mail was handwritten. Letters, postcards, thank you notes, sealed with licked stamps and careful penmanship. You checked the mailbox with hope, not dread, and every envelope felt personal, even the bills. The postman walked. He knew your name, your dog's name, and whether your parents were home. He brought packages from Sears and letters from cousins. And at Christmas, you gave him a card with a tip and a handshake. Your mom had a drawer full of coupons. She clipped them every Sunday while drinking Sanka, sorted them by expiration and saved 20 cents here, 40 cents there. Not because she had to, but because it mattered. You remember TV trays, metal ones with floral designs. You set them up in the living room, ate Salisbury steak from a foil tray, and watched All in the Family while balancing a root beer float. It wasn't elegant. It was perfect. Library cards were sacred, laminated, stamped with your number, and slightly bent from being loved. You knew the smell of old books, the silence of the reading room, and the joy of leaving with a stack taller than your head. The library had a microfiche machine, a mysterious glowing screen where newspapers from the past could be scrolled like time itself. You didn't understand how it worked, but it felt important. Your school had a globe, a real one sitting slightly lopsided with lines that marked the USSR and countries that no longer exist. You spun it gently and dreamed of places you couldn't pronounce. Your dad had a cigar box full of important things. Spare keys, war medals, ticket stubs, fishing lures, and maybe a photo of someone no one ever talked about. It smelled like cedar and mystery. Church on Sunday wasn't optional. You put on your best, even if it was itchy. You sat still, sang hymns you didn't quite know, and watched grown-ups speak in tones reserved for something bigger than themselves. You remember hymns like Amazing Grace and How Great Thou Art sung off-key but with feeling. The sound filled the room, no microphones, just lungs and reverence. Your school had a flag raising every morning. You stood, hand over heart, and recited the Pledge of Allegiance. No one knelt. No one debated. It was just part of the rhythm of the day. There were 3 brands of peanut butter, one kind of ketchup. Milk was whole, eggs were brown, and no one asked if the chicken was free range. It just was because that's how food worked. The fridge had magnets from local plumbers and pizza places, a notepad for grocery lists, and maybe one of those thermometers shaped like a cartoon sun. Nothing was digital. Everything was touchable. You remember when Star Wars hit theaters? Not the franchise, the event. The lines wrapped around the block. People gasped, cheered, left changed. It wasn't just a movie. It was the future kicking down the door. You saw Jaws in a packed theater and then didn't swim for a week. It was the first time a movie followed you home. And somehow, that thrill, that chill, was part of the magic. The news came at 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. That was it. No 24-hour cycle. No breaking news alerts. If something big happened, it earned its way into your home with Walter Cronkite or Barbara Walters guiding the tone. When Elvis died, the world stood still. Even if you weren't a fan, your parents were, or your aunt, or your neighbor. You saw people cry, and that was new because he was more than a singer. He was a symbol. The radio was a lifeline. AM for news, FM for music. You tuned it by hand. No presets, no Bluetooth, just a slow dial static, and the moment when the song finally came in clear. And when it did, when the DJ's voice cut through with, "You're listening to," it felt like the whole world had come into focus. You remember the classroom pencil sharpener, that wall-mounted crank that chewed up pencils like a hungry little machine. The smell of graphite and wood shavings meant learning had begun. And if yours came out too sharp, you blew gently across the tip like a magician. Lunch trays were hard plastic beige, divided and warm in all the wrong places. You got a carton of milk, something vaguely called meat canned corn, and a square of chocolate cake that somehow survived the journey from kitchen to tray intact. Fire drills weren't digital alerts. They were loud bells and single-file lines. You walked out arms crossed, silent as possible, standing in the schoolyard, wondering if this was a drill or something real. But deep down, you trusted the teachers had it covered. The janitor had a name. You knew it. Everyone did. He carried a ring of keys. The size of your head smelled faintly of floor wax and fixed things with quiet dignity. And sometimes, just sometimes, he smiled. Your dog didn't wear sweaters or have an Instagram. He slept on the porch, chased cars he'd never catch, and came home when he was ready. He didn't need a leash, he just knew where home was. You remember scratch and sniff stickers. Sheets of them traded like treasure. Grape popcorn root beer. Some worked better than others. You'd peel one inhale like a perfume critic and declare it authentic with the seriousness of a sommelier. At recess, you played four square, hopscotch, Red Rover. The rules were simple, the stakes were high, and the referee was whoever shouted the loudest. And if someone cried, well, the game paused until they got up, then resumed like nothing happened. You had a yo-yo, not the fancy kind, just plastic with a string that knotted itself daily. You learned walk the dog around the world and eventually gave up trying to impress anyone. It wasn't about tricks. It was about rhythm. Your grandma kept everything buttons in jars, fabric scraps in old tins, photos in dusty envelopes. She didn't call it hoarding. She called it having just in case. And somehow, she was always right. You remember when MTV launched? Music videos 24/7. It felt like the world cracked open and poured out neon and eyeliner. And suddenly, what a band looked like mattered almost as much as what they sounded like. You sat through family slideshows, your uncle clicking the carousel forward, one frame at a time, narrating every photo. Here's the Grand Canyon. Here's your Aunt Martha. And here's that raccoon that stole our trail mix. You groaned, but you watched, because that was love. Vending machines had glass fronts, giant coils, and buttons you had to slam. Chips, candy bars, orange soda in glass bottles. And if the candy got stuck, you banged on the side or waited for someone taller to help. You remember Bic pens, the clear ones. If you pulled out the ink tube and flicked it just right, it became a spitball launcher. Teachers hated it. Students whispered about it. And someone somewhere always got caught. If you made a mistake, you didn't press backspace. You erased it with a pink eraser shaped like a brick or a tiny one at the end of a pencil. If that failed, you crossed it out. Mistakes were part of the page, and no one judged. Every town had a little diner with formica counters, swivel stools, and a waitress who called you hun. You ordered a grilled cheese fries and a chocolate malt, and when it came, it was hot, simple, and perfect. You remember playing in the attic or the basement and finding old things, war medals, rotary phones, jackets that smelled like cedar and mothballs. They weren't just objects. They were stories no one had time to tell yet. Paper dolls, model airplanes, paint by numbers. You didn't need Wi-Fi. You needed scissors glue and the patience to see something take shape from your own two hands. You remember being bored, truly, deeply bored. And from that boredom came invention cardboard castles, detective games, entire soap operas acted out with stuffed animals. Boredom wasn't a curse. It was the soil where imagination grew. You remember silence, the kind that only comes without machines. Just wind through trees, the ticking of a clock, the far-off sound of a lawnmower, a silence so thick you could hear your own breath and feel it. You remember Sunday drives, not to anywhere in particular, just out, into the hills, past farms, through sleepy towns. No playlist, no podcasts, just the hum of tires, the sound of your dad's voice, telling stories you half remembered, and your mom humming softly at the window. You wore hand-me-downs from cousins, neighbors, older siblings. Pants a little too short, jackets with mystery-stained sweaters that smelled like someone else's attic. And you didn't complain, not because you didn't want to, but because everyone did. You remember the smell of a classroom globe, that strange mix of varnish and dust. You'd spin it, press your finger down, and say, "Someday I'll go there." You didn't know where there was. You just knew it was big blue and waiting. Your bike got stolen once and returned the next day. No note, no explanation, just leaning against your porch like nothing happened. And your mom said, maybe they just needed it for a while, and that was enough. Cereal prizes came in the box, not points to scan or codes to enter. A plastic submarine, a ring that changed color, a tiny maze game. You dug for it before your brother could. Sometimes you poured the whole box into a bowl just to get there first. You remember lawn chairs, the kind with woven nylon straps that burned your legs in summer. They folded in strange ways, always pinched your fingers, and lasted longer than some family pets. The ice trays were metal with a lever that cracked them like tectonic plates. You pulled out cloudy cubes with your hands, dropped them into a glass of Tang or Tab, and listened to the fizz like it was music. You remember being told to go outside and don't come back till dinner. And you did. No GPS, no check-ins, just a bike, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and the understanding that someone's mom would feed you if you got hungry. The couch had a built-in ashtray. So did the armrest in the car. No one questioned it. Smoke curled through the restaurants, airports, even hospitals. We didn't know then. Or maybe we did, but chose not to see it. You remember school assemblies, wooden bleachers, microphone, feedback, the principal in a clip-on tie, and everyone squirming in polyester. You sang "This Land Is Your Land" like it was the anthem of your generation. You remember your first library fine, 25 cents. You felt guilty for weeks. You said sorry to the librarian, to the book, to the world. And somehow, that quarter taught more than a lecture ever could. Everyone had a junk drawer, somewhere in the kitchen, filled with rubber bands, birthday candles, expired, coupons, keys to unknown locks. It was chaos. And yet, everything you ever needed was in there. You remember when teachers wrote on the chalkboard with both hands, not to show off, but to save time. Their fingers dusted white, their voices raspy by noon. And when you clapped erasers at the end of the day, it felt like a reward. The TV had a knob, and the top one always fell off. So you turned it with pliers. The antenna had tin foil. The volume crackled, and yet when the opening theme of Mork and Mindy played, it all felt perfect. You remember when a Coke cost a quarter, and if you were lucky, the vending machine gave you two. It happened rarely, but when it did, you looked around and felt like the luckiest kid in America. You remember playing records backward just to hear if there was a secret message. Half scared, half excited. You didn't find the devil, just noise. But the mystery was worth it. You remember typing class, the clack, clack, clack of keys, the ding of the carriage returned the ink on your fingers. You didn't text, you typed, with intention, with rhythm, with mistakes that couldn't be erased. You remember when dinner was on the table at 6, and if you weren't there, you missed it. No reheating, no takeout, just a cold plate and a look from your father that said, "You'll eat it anyway." You had a piggy bank, ceramic, heavy, and shaped like something ridiculous, a cow, a football helmet, a cartoon frog. You didn't check your balance online. You shook it, and you counted by pouring it onto your bed. You remember payphones that took dimes, then quarters. Sometimes they worked. Sometimes they ate your coin and gave nothing back. But you made your call anyway. because you had to, because someone was waiting. You remember walking home from school, alone, with friends, through leaves, puddles, heat, snow, no earbuds, no rides, just your feet, your thoughts, and maybe a stick you found and decided was a sword. You remember the backseat lullabies, classic songs, but the rhythm of the road, the rise and fall of conversation, the occasional crackle from the AM radio, and the steady, steady hum of tires on asphalt. You didn't fall asleep, you drifted. You remember birthday candles, not the ones that relight or sparkle, but simple wax sticks your mom bought in packs of 24. The frosting always melted around them, and someone always sang off key. But when you blew them out, you believed. You remember your first diary, the one with the tiny lock and key. You didn't write much, a few sentences, a secret, a dream, but it felt like a sacred place, a room inside your mind where no one else could go. You remember coin collectors, that one friend's dad who had a whole drawer of wheat pennies and silver dollars. He'd show them off like treasure, holding each one up to the light, as if the past could be seen in the shine. You remember dinner bells, real ones, hung outside or on the porch. When it rang, it meant, come home. No GPS, no text, just the sound echoing through trees and sidewalks, calling you back like a hymn. You remember the good scissors, the ones kept in a special drawer off limits unless it was serious. You tried sneaking them once to cut construction paper, and someone said, not those. You didn't ask again. You remember encyclopedias, entire shelves of knowledge. They weren't updated, they didn't scroll, but they were heavy with truth. You opened one, picked a random page, and learned something because the world still felt like it was waiting to be learned. You remember when someone you loved taught you how to whistle, or tie a knot, or skip a rock. It didn't feel like a lesson. It felt like a gift passed down hand to hand like a folded note no one else could read. You remember tree houses, or at least trying to build one, a few planks nailed to a trunk, maybe a rope ladder, maybe just a keep out sign scribbled in crayon. It wasn't safe, but it was yours. You remember Indian burns, dead legs, and other childhood tortures invented by older siblings. They weren't cruel, not really. They were rituals, initiations, proof that you belonged to a tribe that made its own rules. You remember snow days that weren't quite snow days, just enough flurries to close school, but not enough to sled. So you stayed inside, made cocoa, and watched the flakes hit the window like whispers. You remember when a friend moved away and it felt like the world was ending. You didn't have emails or phones to stay in touch. You just promised to write, and maybe you did. Once, maybe twice, and maybe that was enough. You remember piano recitals, the silence before the first note, the sweaty palms, the way your foot barely reached the pedal. You don't remember what you played, but you remember the applause and the relief and your dad's smile. You remember Letterman jackets, mood rings, feathered hair, and banana clips. Fashion wasn't curated. It was experimented, and even the mistakes were proudly worn because they were yours. You remember your family's Christmas lights, the giant bulbs that got hot to the touch. One went out, they all went out. So your dad checked each one by hand, muttering under his breath, stringing them anyway, because that's what dads did. You remember your first heartbreak. Not the kind in movies, but the kind that makes you stare out the bus window in silence, listening to Chicago or Bread on your headphones and pretending you're okay. You remember cassette tapes unwinding in your pocket. You dig out a pencil, spin them back together with careful fingers, and say a silent prayer before pressing play. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Either way, you kept listening. You remember spelling bees, not televised, not sponsored, just folding chairs in the cafeteria and a word you'd never heard before. Your knees shaking, your heart racing. And somehow you spelled it right or you didn't. And either way, you survived. You remember trick-or-treating alone or with friends. No adults, no flashlights. Just pillowcases full of candy porches, glowing orange, and the sound of distant laughter in the fog. You remember the last time you hugged your grandparent, not realizing it would be the last. They smelled like Vicks or Aqua Velva or rose powder. Their voice said your name like no one else could, and after they were gone, no one ever said it the same way again. You remember sleepovers that felt like tiny lifetimes, games, ghost stories, cereal at midnight, and the long, slow drift into sleep while someone whispered one last joke in the dark. You remember library book sales, long folding tables, cardboard boxes labeled 25C each, and that unmistakable smell of old pages and binding glue. You didn't go looking for anything specific. You just looked and often found magic. You remember the feel of a new composition notebook, the marble cover, the stiff spine, the first blank page. It felt like promise. Like maybe this time, you'd finish the whole thing. Even if you didn't, you always started with care. You remember the clack of a screen door, that quick bang against the frame one you got yelled at for, but still you let it slam because you liked the sound. It meant summer bare feet and lemonade. You remember when lunch meant thermoses, real ones, metal, with a screw-top cup and a glass liner that shattered if you dropped it. You did once, and for the rest of the year, your soup came cold in a jelly jar. You remember prank calls when your phone didn't display a number, and saying as your refrigerator running was peak comedy. And when the voice on the other end growled, "You little punks," you slammed the receiver down and ran. You remember riding in the bed of a pickup truck, wind in your face, your cousin pretending to surf, your uncle yelling to sit down. No seat belts, no helmets, just trust and a few grass stains. You remember chalkboards, not whiteboards, not smartboards, but green or black, dusty, streaked, and endlessly reusable. The chalk screeched sometimes, and when the board was full, the teacher wiped it clean and the room fell quiet. You remember fogged windows on winter mornings. You'd draw pictures with your finger, smiley faces, initials, a heart with 2 letters inside, and when the glass cleared, your art faded, but you remembered it anyway. You remember flashlights under blankets, reading books you weren't supposed to, telling ghost stories, sneaking cookies. The world was small, warm, and full of secrets that only you and your flashlight knew. You remember your grandfather's hands, rough, strong, lined with time. He built things that lasted, fixed what broke. And when he held your hand, it felt like nothing bad could ever reach you. You remember mail-order catalogs that had toys you circled in red, knowing you might never get them, but hoping anyway. There was no add to cart. There was wait and maybe. You remember the first time you were trusted with keys to the house, to the shed, to something that mattered. You didn't clip them to your belt. You carried them like treasure. You jingled them in your pocket, just to remind yourself, they trust me. You remember cotton candy. At the fair, sticky fingers pink fluff that vanished on your tongue, and the sound of the Ferris wheel creaking overhead. The world spun slowly, and that was exactly right. You remember the sound of rain on a tin roof or on the hood of a station wagon. It wasn't just background noise, it was rhythm, it was comfort. And on nights like those, you slept better than you ever have since. You remember house rules for board games, monopoly money tucked under the board, free parking always paid out, and no one agreed on how to play Uno. But you did it anyway, and laughed until someone threw the deck. You remember the smell of a baseball glove leather and dust and summer, breaking it in with a ball and rubber bands, tossing it back and forth with your dad as the sun went down and the porch light came on. You remember I love you being said in smaller ways. A packed lunch, a sweater draped over your shoulders, a light left on, a car warmed up in winter. It wasn't always spoken, but you knew. You remember floor vents in the winter crouching over them, letting the warm air billow your shirt like a balloon. You'd sit there for as long as you could until someone else claimed it. It was unofficial family real estate. You remember Christmas morning, not just the gifts, but the quiet. The glow of tree lights in the early dark, the sound of wrapping paper, the smell of cinnamon rolls, and someone saying, "Just 5 more minutes" from down the hall. You remember being told, "This is the last summer you'll be a kid." You didn't believe it. You didn't want to. But part of you knew, the way you know when a song is ending even before the last note. You remember looking through old photo albums, not digital, not filtered, just paper pages, plastic sleeves, and fading Polaroids that bent at the corners. You didn't remember the exact moment they were taken, but the feeling that stayed. You remember your mother's handwriting. On lunch notes, on birthday cards, on grocery lists taped to the fridge. Loopy, uneven, but unmistakably hers. And now, when you see it, your heart pauses. You remember the way your childhood home smelled, not of perfume or food, but home. The creak of the hallway, the chill of the basement, the warmth of the kitchen, when bread was toasting and someone was humming. You remember the last time you saw the neighborhood as a kid, just before you moved away, or before someone else did. You didn't know it was the last time. That's the trick with memory. The endings are always quiet. You remember that one teacher who changed you not with a lesson, but with a look, a sentence, a moment when they saw something in you that no one else had. And even now, decades later, you hope you made them proud. You remember not having much and somehow not needing more. A few good friends, a biker radio, a Saturday with sunshine. That was enough. That was everything. You remember lying on your back in the grass looking at clouds naming their shapes and wondering where the sky ended. No phones, no pictures, just thoughts, just sky. You remember sitting beside your grandparent in silence. Nothing needed to be said, just the sound of a spoon stirring tea, the ticking of a kitchen clock, their hand resting gently on yours. Presence deep, wordless presence. You remember the laughter from porches, from school buses, from living rooms full of cousins and soda and too many cookies. Loud, clumsy, joyful. The kind of laughter that comes from being completely known, completely safe. You remember that for a time the world felt smaller, not because it lacked wonder, but because it was closer. The people, the places, the stories. You didn't scroll to find them. You walked, you waited, you listened, and now you stand on a porch in the present, maybe not the same porch, but one like it. The air is different, softer maybe, or heavier. You can't quite tell. Children pass on scooters. A song plays faintly from somewhere. A breeze carries the smell of cut grass, and for a second, just 1 second, you are back. Back in the 70s. Back when gas stations had full service and milk came in glass. Back when your TV had knobs and your heart had room to be bored. Back when mistakes were crossed out in ink and apologies came with cookies. Back when time moved slower, not because the clocks ticked different, but because you paid attention. And now, as you sit older, maybe wiser, definitely softer, you realize the truth. Those moments never really left. They live in you, in how you parent, in how you love, in the way you still hum that one song from 1978 when no one's around. Because the 70s weren't just a decade. They were a season of life full of color confusion, community, and care. And while much of it has changed, what mattered most never did. Not really. Thank you for remembering. And may the smallest things always find their way back to you.